So this will be a quick one today. This one.
Councillors, CEO, directors, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Iwi people, represent a human link dating back over 60,000 years. As part of one of the oldest living cultures on the planet, we pay our respects to the Indigenous custodians and acknowledge their elders past and present and recognise their continuing connection to our land and our community. There's nobody in the public gallery. We welcome our online audience and declare the meeting open. We don't have anybody from Mackay churches combined to lead us today, so let us together seek a blessing on this meeting. Lord, help us to be strong, for there is always much to be done. Help us to conduct ourselves in the spirit of truth and compassion. Guide our hearts and minds so that our actions may always be fair and reasonable. Bless our officers and staff, watch over our community. Amen. Councillors, thank you very much. There's nobody absent on council business. There's no apologies. We have a request for leave of absence from Councillor Townsend on the 14th of April, and Councillor Hassan has requested a leave of absence on the 28th of April. We can deal with that right now. So would somebody like to move that those leaves of absence be granted? Councillor Jones, Councillor Mann seconds. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried. Thank you. In condolences, you'll note that a matriarch of one of our leading Indigenous families, affectionately known as Nana Ramsamy, has passed in this last week. And as a council, I think there's some councillors who want to speak, but as a council, we certainly pay our respects and are with the family at this stage. And I'd like councillors to know that we are working with the family and Queensland Health to have the family funeral in the MECC, because it will be a very large funeral. And at this stage, it's all looking pretty good for the funeral to be conducted in the plenary halls of the MECC. So, would somebody like to speak on that? Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to pay my respects today and that of the communities today to the Ramsamy family. Noelia Ramsamy was born on the 16th of October 1918, I think it was, and made it to the ripe old age of 103. Noelia was known to many as Nana, and she now rests with her late husband Ram Chandra, otherwise known as Pop. The biggest compliment and fondest memories anyone could give or share about Nana was that family meant everything. Nana was not a selfish woman, and family meant so much more than just her immediate family. It meant the community that she lived in. There was never a distinguish between cultures, as she believed we were all human beings, and no matter what culture you came from, Aboriginal, Torres Strait or South Sea Islander or the greater wider community, her death has affected everyone as well as those that knew her in the Slave Point community. She had a strong connection to her culture and she regularly attended community celebrations such as NAIDOC, flag raising ceremonies at council, and was involved in teaching others about her culture when storytelling, and was involved in educational projects in the Botanic Gardens when they were being developed for future generations. If you asked her what was the secret to a long life, she would say, eating fish, rice and mangoes. They were some of her favourite foods. Many of her grandchildren are very proud to call her their Nan, and were very proud to say her age as the matriarch and elder in our community. She was amazing for her age, and only on the Sunday before she passed, she was still requesting to go out and about just to get out of the house, heading out for those little road trips. You just couldn't keep her home. One of her many grandsons, Adam Dool, and his family have fond memories of taking Nana to her hometown in Torres Strait for family holidays. And her granddaughter Tash Ramsamy, who lived and cared for Nana over the past couple of years, has taken her on many a trip in the region and the state so that she could enjoy the beach and the great outdoors. Her last trip was Sunday before she passed, and she went to Finchatten for the day. Nana's passing is a great loss to the community, of which they will grieve and miss her for many years to come.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Anybody else? And that's well said. I can certainly remember being at Nana Ramsammy's 100th birthday celebration, where she said it was really very, very nice, but she'd rather be fishing. And so that's a great tribute to a well-loved member of our community. All right, are there any other condolences? No other condolences? Any conflicts of interest to declare today, councillors? None, thank you. Confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 10th of March. They've been circulated. Would somebody like to move that they be adopted? Councillor Green moves, Councillor Bonaventura seconds. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried. We've had no business arising out of those previous minutes, as advised to us. There's no mirror minutes today. Let's move on to the consideration of committee reports and recommendations, the draft minutes of the Sustainability and Environment Advisory Committee on the 25th of February. Are there any questions around this one? Okay, would somebody like to move its adoption? Councillor May, seconded by Councillor Green. Councillor May.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Another good meeting by the Sustainability and Environment Committee. A couple of things that I'd just like to draw out for attention is the presentations that we had from North Queensland Bulk Ports in regards to their coral dashboard, and the link is there for councillors to go and have a look at that. That's being updated all of the time on the condition of the coral within the North Queensland Bulk Ports region. Also, we had an update from reef catchments, and a couple of the projects that they're undertaking is the Bushy Island African Big-Headed Anti-Eradication Program, and of course something that's of interest to many people is the turtle survey and threat management is another project that they're undertaking. From a Mackay Regional Council point of view, we updated the committee on the adoption of the Environmental Sustainability Strategy, which went to Council on the 24th of February. Pardon me. We also had a bit of an update on our Land Restoration Fund, and we're looking into that a little further. There's money available from Commonwealth Government in regards to that, so the officers are looking into that. And to note there that Tim our Environmental Sustainability Officer, has been accepted onto the LGAQ Climate Change and Resilience Advisory Group, which is great for the Mackay region.
Thanks, Councillor May. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor May stole some of my thunder, I guess, but that's all right. Many a discussion on a range of topics at the meeting, and I agree with Councillor May that it certainly was a good meeting. I also was going to mention the African big-headed ant infestation at Bushy Island and the turtle surveys, but I was also going to mention that there has been some tree mapping for the broadleaf tea tree, which is a bit of a special species in the Slave Point Reserve. So they're just a few of the things that that we heard about at the meeting, and yes, I agree, it was a very good meeting.
Thanks,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Jones. Any other speakers? No other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. In the correspondence and officers' reports now, the Office of the Mayor and CEO, the strategic financial report for February. CEO, you speak with us.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Just letting councillors know that we're tracking to the revised budget that was adopted last month, which is no surprise. So targeting an operating deficit of 4.91 million, down from the 5.5 that was in the previous budget. Revenues up a little bit in rates and charges, and down a bit in grants and funding. The main risk for us is in the CapEx program going forward. So we're 93% year to date of where we expect it to be, but it is a back-end loaded program. So that is what we're keeping an eye on, and where most of the risk is.
Thanks, CEO. Questions for the CEO? No questions for the CEO? Would somebody like to move then the strategic financial report's adoption? It's a good report actually, so well done to the Director. Thank you very much. Somebody like to move its adoption? Councillor Englert moves, seconded by Councillor Mann. Councillor Englert.
As you said, Mayor, good report, but the CEO's covered everything.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on then to the reports from directors. The Development Services Report 11.2.1 and Director Nugent.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I would like to provide an overview of some highlights from the Development Services Monthly Review Report for February. Preliminary work has commenced on Minor Amendment 5 to the Mackay Region Planning Scheme. Minor Amendment 5 is proposed to include the recently adopted flood studies for North Mackay, West Mackay and Andy Grove Beaconsfield within the Flood and Coastal Hazards Planning Scheme overlay. The draft concept design for the Blue Water Quay improvements has now been completed as part of the public realm improvements within the Riverside Precinct in the Mackay Waterfront Priority Development Area. Ongoing feedback and discussions will be held with internal stakeholders on how these works could interface with the adjoining sites. Work on a number of park upgrades is continuing. Work commenced on Cane Cutters Drive Park in February with the old play equipment being removed, and works undertaken on concrete paths and play area edging. The new play equipment will be installed in March. In February, Council's Economic Development Team finalised the engagement of a consultant to develop a framework to evaluate the economic, social and environmental impacts of identified events held in the Mackay region. This will allow for a more thorough and in-depth post-event review of the benefits of events funded through Council's Invest Mackay Events Conference Attraction Program. Work has commenced with a professional conference organiser to manage and coordinate the National Economic Development Conference to be held in Mackay later in 2021. A local organising committee with external stakeholders has been formed to facilitate the delivery of this conference. As at the end of February, 13 applications have been received and approved under the newly launched Building Improvement Grant. Of the 13 applications, 3 of the applicants have completed the works and received their rebate. And finally, I've got to provide an update from the Serena Sugar Shed, and the Chunky Orange and Pineapple Marmalade in the Chef's Gusto range was released in February. The initial batch is selling well, and just an update on the Chef's Gusto products. Most now feature a new label design, adding to the visual appeal of these products. And with that, I'd like to present this report to Council for consideration and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Director. It's great to see that boot camp too, the 50 people that attended that boot camp. It sounds like a very big year coming up in terms of events and being well handled by your department so far. Questions for the Director? Councillor Mann first.
I've got 2 questions. First one is electronic page 43, City Centre Reference Group. And I note that it says they've been meeting since June 2020 to look at progressing issues and opportunities. And I just wondered if any of those issues and opportunities have been identified and what's going on with that.
Director?
Yes, so in response to that question, Your Worship, I'd just like to say watch this space. There is some work going on a chamber or reference group-led initiative that we'll be able to provide some more information on soon. We've got another meeting with the group tomorrow morning. So the focus of that City Centre Reference Group is really for that group to develop ideas that can then be led by the chamber and also by the business community within the city centre. So we are working on something, and I'll provide more information as soon as I can.
Great, thank you. Now,
Two others.
further.
So electronic page 48, in terms of the National Economic Development Conference and the organising committee, I'm just wondering if Mackay tourism input has been sought, given we want to try and get people to come early and stay late after that conference?
Or should I, well, I should hope so. Director?
Yes, Your Worship, absolutely. We would be engaging with Mackay Tourism as we would for any other ones.
Okay. And last one, in terms of, the economic indicators, they're quarterly, and the last data we've got is September 20. So I think there should have been something issued December 20, and I'm just conscious that the median house price and the residential vacancy rate would probably be substantially different to what's in the report. So I'm just wondering if those details are being updated soon.
Director?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We're still waiting for the data, so we're still waiting for the data from the state to be able to finalise those. We are aware that was something that was highlighted in the preparation of this report. That we would have expected to receive that last quarter data by now, and we haven't. And we're not sure why we haven't got it yet, but as soon as we do, we will update the data in the report.
Thank you. So, and then Councillor Townsend, it was you? No? Go on, Councillor Jones, right?
Thank you, Worship. My question's on page 37, wondering why that there were so many change applications. I see that there were 42. I'm just curious, that amount of applications coming back in because changes have had to be made, whether or not any further education before lodgement needs to be had to allow a better application and therefore less work for our staff.
Director?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Yeah, they do. These applications do take up a lot of time, but the majority of the changes that we're seeing actually relate to older applications that have been around for a little while. So with market conditions kicking up the way they are, we are seeing either a developer's coming to board land subject to an old approval, or there's an old approval that the developer is looking to reactivate, and quite often they will have a look at that and make some changes based on current market conditions.
Councillor Green?
Yes, electronic page 45, Platypus Beach. Do we have an update on the water quality at the present time?
Director?
Yes.
Can you answer that one?
Yes, I'll answer it to the extent that I can. There is work being done on a water quality or recreational management plan for the site. So we just want to make sure that we handle that correctly, taking into account all the different factors. So there's still some work and internal discussions going on around that. We hope to have something sort of finalised in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
And our plan is to have that displayed on a board close to the swimming area so that people can make up their mind whether it's safe or not to swim. Councillor
Given that
Green?
the Easter holidays are upon us soon, will it be done by then, or are you saying it's possibly not?
Director?
Yes, look, it should be. Sorry, I can't confirm exactly right now. If you give me till next Wednesday, I can probably give you a firmer answer, but we're not far off.
Thank you.
That was the aim, Councillor,
Okay.
to make sure that the school holidays follow Easter as well, so yeah. Any further questions? Councillor Bonaventura?
Just on page 52, Your Worship, there's a graph on e-statistics, and I note that the JobLink analytic report shows a drop of 50% from 3,043 to 1,052, and the rest of the year in our graph's been all up around 4,000, 3,900. Just want to know if the director's got any ideas why that dropped dramatically.
Director?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's a bit, I'll try and explain the best I can. I'm not an expert in these sorts of things, but we've been advised by the company that runs that website or hosts that website for us that February was an outlier, and the results have something to do with so February being a shorter month, and we actually had apparently more users and more sessions that month than January, but the time on site was shorter and there were less pages viewed per session.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but overall, yeah, it's a bit of an anomaly, but it doesn't seem to be any indication of anything significant.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? No further questions? Would somebody like to move the report's adoption? Councillor Englert moves, seconded by Councillor Jones. Councillor Englert.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Again, a report full of green dots, except for the one pesky lagoon weed management issue ongoing. Again, council's attempted to get a long arm excavator in to remove some of those weeds, but due to the wet weather, we don't want to ruin the edge of that, so that will be an ongoing issue for a little while. As the director mentioned, chunky orange and pineapple marmalade. I should have asked him questions why. I'm sure Paddington Bear will be losing his proverbial over that, but apparently it's doing really well, so whatever floats your boat. Serena Sugar Shed is doing well. Online bookings have significantly increased despite the impacts of COVID-19, and the centre's recorded a doubling of online bookings for the year compared to the same time last year. Financials are all good. There's a small deficit in the area of salaries, which will be fixed once leave is taken by staff. As mentioned in the last meeting, the community reference group for the Northern Beaches Community Hub has been has started up, and Hooked on Mackay social media competition was launched in February to coincide with the opening of the barramundi season, which is part of our overall fishing strategy. And just to mention that 16th to 17th of April, next upcoming event is the Free Native Plant Giveaway Day at Mackay Natural Environment Centre Nursery.
Thanks, Councillor Lingard. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Speaker for, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Your Worship. Given the tragic and devastating flood events that are unfolding across southeast Queensland and New South Wales, I think it's timely to highlight the work that Mackay Regional Council continues to do to better understand the impacts of flooding in our region. Council recently adopted flood studies for North Mackay, West Mackay, Endergrove and Beaconsfield, and this will soon be included in an amendment to the Flood and Coastal Hazards Planning Scheme overlay, as well as update the state's planning policy mapping layers. A draft flood study and management plan has been prepared for the Mackay Floodplain Management Plan and will soon go out to community for consultation. And finally, the Flood Intelligence Plan project is ongoing, including a pilot flood management assessment and action plan and a total flood warning system. Local governments are directed by the Minister for Infrastructure and Planning to continually seek to improve their risk profile and update their planning schemes to contain the most up-to-date information to reduce the material risk to people and to property, as we're witnessing in the other parts of our country. And I'm confident this council is doing that well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Green. Any other speakers? Councillor May speaking for.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just one item that I'd like to speak about, and that's the Northern Beaches Community Hub. We had our first meeting of our reference groups, both the community reference group and the agency reference group. And as we know, there's 22,000 people live in the Northern Beaches area, and Council in its last term secured a 3.7 hectare site in the Northern Beaches there for the establishment of some community infrastructure that has been well overdue for that community. So it was really great that we had fantastic response from both the community members themselves to be part of that reference group and the agencies to be part of that reference group. It is so important for the council in this preliminary designing stage of the project that we harness what the community really wants out of the Northern Beaches Community Hub, and we make sure that we facilitate that to meet the community needs. So the presentations from our officers, and we have Councillor Green and Councillor Hassan and myself that, as councillors on that committee. We also have our two directors, Angela Hayes and Alita Nugent, as well as council officers on that committee. And they presented to the members of both of those reference groups an update on where the project is at and where we are looking to move to in the future, gathering in from them some feedback. We had some great discussions at the meeting. That'll be taken on board. We'll come back to them again this month, and we will progress on for there. So it's watch this space, a very exciting time for Mackay Regional Council and the community.
Thank you very much, Councillor May. Other speakers? Councillor Bonaventura speaking for.
Yes. Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of points. I note the graph on page 44 shows a big increase in the time spent mowing and snipping our parks. And I would like to congratulate our park staff on this effort, should I say. Rapid grass growth this time of year is the norm, but the dedication to your role to keep it tip-top is commendable and visible, very, very visible. I can honestly say that this is the first year I have not had any phone calls in relation to overgrown parks and when are they getting mowed and they're knee high. So that's a real positive. And can I ask the Director to pass on my congratulations to the team for an effort they're keeping up at this time of year, especially over the last 2 months. Speaking on parks, it's good to see the park upgrades are continuing with Cane Cutters Drive, Ron Anderson, Neil Barker and Brownsey Street all getting a mention in this month's report. But I think it's important to note that not all parks get upgraded. You know, some parks are returned to a simple state with less formal embellishments, allowing them to be used in a different way. And also, just in relation to the desilting project that Councillor Englert mentioned, this is still moving slowly, and this is an area I'm very interested in, and I've spoken about my thoughts on doing this once or twice and the lasting benefits that we need to do it right. If we don't get this right, the problem will be back in a few years. And I would like to chat with the Director, if possible, at some stage about some other options that we might look at to giving us a long-lasting benefit in relation to this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bonaventura. Are there any other speakers? No other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried. Thank you. 11.2.2 is the Facilitating Development of the Mackay Region Policy, which is the Plantation Palms property, the residential development over there, and stages 4 through to 5A. Director, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Worship. Just briefly, this is a request for an extension. So under the policy, someone who holds a facilitating development approval can apply for a 12-month extension, and this is what's occurring here. And that you'll see the report outlines the steps that are being taken to develop those lots and why this additional time is required just to get that development up and running.
It's a pretty well straightforward report, a COVID-19 extension. Are there any questions for the Director? Councillor Seymour.
Yeah, I just got one question. They applied for concessions at 20% on that, and the DA approval was in 2011. How come, is it a common thing for developers to get concessions at that point?
Is it a common thing for...
Well, it's 20% from the original...
from their original
approval,
yeah. Director?
Yes, thank you. This approval was granted under a previous version of the policy. So at that time, the policy included a schedule that applied to residential development of this type, and it did have different percentages compared with some of the percentages that are in the policy now for different types of development. So we've kept, this has still been assessed within that framework of that previous version of the policy.
I think we've changed it twice since then. So, so this one is capped at $500,000, and it all depends on the lots being registered by the 10th of April 2022. So, are there any further questions? Councillor Bonaventura.
Just one. It states that concessions were endorsed in April 2019, and I do recall that. It just also says in the report that with the latest amendment approved on the 19th of February 2021, could you tell me whether what effect that had on the application or asking for extensions? So would that have had an effect on them asking for an extension, the fact that we were late in doing that, or?
No. So if they're still, so their current approval doesn't expire until April, so they're still within the currency of their current approval. In any event, if we were over that because they lodged their application for that extension a little while ago, if it's our delay holding them up, we wouldn't penalise them if it took us a month or two longer to get it up to council for consideration.
Okay. Further questions? No further questions? Would somebody like to move the report's adoption? Please, Councillor Green moves, seconded by Councillor Engler. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Your Worship. As per the officer's recommendations and the discussion we just had, I'm happy to support this report. The reassessment of the application for an extension of 12 months to the current concessions approved for various stages of the Plantation Palms development in Rural View determines that the eligibility and site-specific policy criteria as it stands has been met. The developer has experienced genuine delays due to COVID-19 and minor changes to the development approvals, but they do demonstrate a commitment to the project to be finalised well within the 12-month extension timeframe, utilising local construction industry, manufacturers and suppliers.
Thank you very much. Speaker against? Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on to the engineering commercial infrastructure reports now. And the first ECI report is for Transport and Drainage Director.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. So just highlighting safety, so we had 12 incidents with 7 injuries, which is quite high percentage. You'll notice there's 3 knee injuries, and one of those resulted in a LTI, so, which resulted from an employee stepping out of a vehicle on uneven ground, twisting on their knee and doing damage to the meniscus. So something we've obviously focused on. I've spoken out about our recent ECI management work health and safety meeting to obviously get that message out around those knee injuries. Overall, there's been an increased number of work orders, particularly around potholes with the wet weather, and obviously signage. Damage to signs continues to be one of our main issues. We've just done some work to resurface Lansdowne and Jackie Road with a poly modified bitumen, which is a temporary treatment until we can do some rehab on that road. So it has become quite potholed, so that basically gives us about 18 months of coverage until we get into a proper rehab, probably in the middle of next year. On the asset management, we continue to work on that. There's been a fair bit of work in pre-work and getting ready for the next valuation on water and sewage, which will commence in the new financial year. Mowing and maintenance on our open drains, so 72 work orders complete, so we do balance that around the condition of the drains being able to get access at this time of the year, but trying to keep on top of that in the current rainfall. And I will highlight we just had a session with cane growers, even though it's not last month, where we, off the back of Councillor May being approached, I think, from the members meeting, just to give an overview of how we deal with our unsealed roads. So it was very well received, and we were able to take them through that process so they understand the mechanism we work through. There's a couple of takeaways from that, but yeah, happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Director. Questions for the Director on this report? Councillor Mann.
So, page 73, in terms of the rubberised bitumen, I'm just wondering if there's other sites we've used and what the results were, given that Horse and Jockey Road is very low traffic as well, and is it cost effective in comparison to chip seal?
Director.
Yeah, through years. So this was around 10 grand worth of work to put on the seal, so it's only a temporary seal. So it just fell off the back of the increased haulage that came off the back of the ring roads, identified as a road that needed to do work, but it was also then sitting on a rehab program. So we're able to get some money off TMR in relation to some of those repair work. So it was decided here, given the rehab work coming on, this was a way to be able to deal with the interim issue, especially in the wet season.
Very good. Further questions? Councillor Langlet.
Worship, just in regards to the LTI with the getting out of the truck, I noticed that over, the last few years, that's something that's probably consistent, and I imagine it's quite a difficult thing to overcome. But I'm curious, are we looking? Is it vehicles? Is it personnel training? What are we looking at as an organisation to?
How are we addressing it?
Yeah.
Director.
That's a great question. Look, I think it's something that we've continually talked about, and in this case there was sloping ground on the side of the road, so they pull off the side of the road. It's probably something they do every day, year in, year out, and for whatever reason this time, they've suddenly hit something and twisted on their knee. So, we are having a bit of a look. Is there an issue about the safety boots they're wearing versus, so are they lace up ones? But there's not really a key issue that comes out. We seem to get them a little bit in spurts, but it's certainly something we've continually focused on in relation to staff. So, we'll continue to have a look and see if we can find any root causes, identified, and put in some preventive actions from that.
Thank you.
Further questions? Somebody like to move the report's adoption, please? Councillor Hassan, seconded by Councillor Jones. Councillor Hassan.
Thank you. Just echoing the Director's report, unfortunately there was that lost time injury this past month and a further 12 reportable incidents, which while these were minor, they do highlight the importance of our focus on safety. And of course our end goal is that we want to see our staff and contractors go safely home to their families at the end of the day. We have seen a fair amount of rainfall so far this year, which obviously has impacted on our road network. This month has seen an above average number of work orders closed out as crews focused on pothole repairs. And I just ask for the community's patience as this work is undertaken. It's obviously a huge job for our staff, and request that people continue to drive to the road conditions. Our teams are doing their utmost to make sure that our roads are safe. The wet weather's also impacted on mowing and maintenance and of the open drainage network. So while 72 work orders were closed out for the month, the intermittent rainfall has continued to affect the ability of crews to maintain those areas. So I'd just like to again assure the community that council is doing its best to ensure that those works are completed in a timely manner, and we're obviously also seeking additional contract resource to assist in this area. There's many other works being undertaken by the transport and drainage teams, including cleaning and maintenance of our boat ramps, replacement of the floating walkway at the harbour boat ramp, resurfacing works to roads on our priority list, and line marking works, which have mostly been completed outside business hours to lessen the impact on the community. So our staff and contractors do a great job, and I'd pass on my thanks to all involved.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hassan. Speaker against. Any other speakers? Councillor Mann, speaking for.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Look, I just wanted to thank the Director for the amount of information that we're getting in reports in regard to asset management. We all know it's a hugely important area of council, and so I think it's really good that we get that amount of information so we understand, I guess, the value of the assets, the age of them, and how we're going to treat them going forward. So just pass on my thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Mann. Other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried. Thank you. Then point 3.2, the ECI report for waste. Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. So again, focusing on safety, you'll see that we had another truck fire incident. So I can't remember the number, but something like about 5 in the last 12 months. So it continues to be an issue. We've obviously tried to put some education out there to our residents, but we're still obviously getting things that shouldn't be in the bin being placed in the bin, which is then causing issues with our contractors. The not-for-profit organisations are tracking very well for this time of year. We've previously had a few issues with those, but obviously there's been some reviews in the number of bins and things they have out in place, so that's maybe been managed quite well. You'll see bin repairs and replacements has returned. There was a big spike in last month. It's returned to sort of more of a normal, slightly ahead of most of the year, but sort of corresponds well to the same period last year. Hogan's Pocket landfill, so can't get a read on usable tonnages. It's sort of up and down. There obviously was a shorter month in February, but it's dropped again, but it's still around the same range. The current waste vouchers are due to expire at the end of the month, so only a few days left to go. So the redemption rate was about 25%, which probably expect that. We normally see a bit of an increase in the last period, so probably correspond to a similar figure at the March of 2020, which was about 29.5%. Other than that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Director. It's good to see those waste vouchers being used, but the application of those waste vouchers has a cost, and I think the cost was outlined in here at about $400,000. So, questions? Councillor Bella.
The fires in the waste trucks indeed concerning. A couple of questions. Is it smouldering embers being in the waste picked up, or is it something that combusts under pressure within the actual truck containment? And my other question is, are they widespread, or is this happening in a certain area kind of thing?
Director.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good question, Dennis. It's normally, I think it's a combusting issue when they're compacting down the rubbish that's in that's causing the issue. I would have to take on notice if there's actually a particular area where we're seeing it, but I'm not aware it hasn't been raised as an issue.
Councillor Bella.
Just subsequent question. I'm just wondering if in your investigations you could let us know if it's found out what exactly is causing the problem, and then like we as councillors can probably start putting it out there that really trying to stop this thing happening. This is of indeed great concern to me. I think it could end up in all sorts of trouble, to be honest.
Through your worship, it's mainly been batteries. I haven't had the findings from the current one to confirm if they've been able to identify the ignition source, but what they do is they obviously they have a camera on the bin, so they go back and try and identify where they may have found that whatever's caused the combustion to occur. But traditionally, it's been the major instance we've seen has been the result of batteries.
Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Bonaventura.
Just first one, if I can, just to follow on from Councillor Balla. In doing that bit of research, will you also look at other councils, like our near neighbours, Rockhampton, Townsville, to see whether they're suffering the same issue and whether they've had any similar issues just in recent, because you're right, we've had a very large spike in the last 12 months, and I think it's well over, probably closer to 8 or 9, I think, that we've got. But yeah, I wouldn't mind if the director could find that out as well.
Director?
Yeah, through your worship. We certainly had some discussions, obviously with Isaac and with Sunday, so I think they've had incidents, but not the number we have. So we have talked about, is there an education program we do across the region? And I'll have to take on notice. I'm not sure if it's been discussed at all, Matt, but that's certainly an avenue for us to also talk about if other local governments are seeing the same increase.
All right, further questions? Councillor Green.
Yes, since we've started taking on Rockhampton's recyclables, have we experienced a change in our contamination percentages, given that we were tracking very well as Mackay Regional Council?
Director.
Thanks, Your Worship. Very good question, Councillor. So, unfortunately, we only measure our own contamination, so that's normally from audits we do, whether that is a truck that comes in and we do an audit, or we go and do individual bin audits. So we don't actually measure the contamination at the same level for the other councils that come into our region, so Isaac, Whitsunday or Rockhampton. So we have talked about trying to get a similar program so we can identify that. So, but we would have to take that more off what the MRF operator is seeing, and there probably is a higher level of contamination seen in the incoming tonnes that are outside of our region, but we don't have a quantifiable measure on that.
So we can't trounce Rocky yet, Councillor Green. So. Further questions? Councillor Mann. Sorry,
Yes,
Councillor Mann. Well
So just on electronic page 85, 50% of monthly action plans activities carried out. Just wondered if that's below KPI and if there's a reason for that.
Director, can you answer that?
Can I get that question again? Sorry.
Question again.
So it's in relation to the monthly action plans, and it says 50% of monthly action plan activities were carried out. Is that below KPI, and is there a reason?
I might take that on notice, Councillor, and come back if that's okay.
Okay. Take it on notice. Further questions? Councillor May.
I have two questions, Your Worship, thanks. Just in relation to the not-for-profit groups, and I see a number of them haven't expended any money in regards to what's available to them. I'm just wondering, coming towards the end of the financial year, do we do an assessment on that and not automatically renew that if they haven't used it in the previous 12 months?
Director.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, so normally, obviously, we communicate with the not-for-profits quite regularly, probably on a quarterly basis where we send them advice. So it's something I'll take on notice to see if we have a historical position where people haven't utilised that we review that. So generally, we're still working within the same parameters. So it's probably more about if we get other requests or additional non-for-profits trying to access that funding that we may have to review that at that time.
The second one?
Second question, just in relation to the dump vouchers and really for community information, the question that I get asked the most is why do we not allow the vouchers to carry over? We have an end date on them. So just for community information, if you could explain why we don't carry those dump vouchers over and they actually expire, given that we're 1 month out of this expiry date.
Yeah, thanks. Councillor. I mean, I think it's the liability issue we carry from year to year. So obviously, we work on a financial year. So at any one time, even those vouchers, that people have access to vouchers because they have a slight crossover with the rates, but it just gets too hard from an accounting point of view. If there's a number of vouchers sitting out there and we're not sure when they're going to get redeemed, we have to make allowances for that in future budgets. So that's generally the reason why we've locked in on the position we have.
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions? Councillor Bonaventura.
Page 87, Your Worship, I note the gate fees are up by 319,000, so that's over the budget estimation. Is there a rough breakdown on what the major factor to this is? Like, it's a good figure for us, but is there a major reason for it?
Director, can you answer that?
Yeah, through you, Worship. So yeah, we've had an increase in our commercial and industrial waste being deposited, and obviously that attracts a higher charge than a normal gate fee. So generally we're seeing more regulated waste and contaminated soils than we've anticipated. So whether that's off the back of the increased construction industry as we're seeing at the moment, but don't have an exact reason why we're seeing that, but happy that we're receiving those revenues.
Fantastic. And secondary question, Councillor?
And just on page 88, I note bin replacement numbers over the last months are averaging around 386 compared to our annual medium of 277. Has the Director received any indication on what is causing the spike? Is it just our ageing bin fleet, or is there anything that stands out?
Director?
Yeah, through your worship, I think we highlighted last month was an anomaly, and we probably believe that was probably more people being at home. If we look at the current data and that corresponded back to the previous period, it sort of is lining up. So we have sort of seen this number occurring 12 months ago, sort of in the same period of time. So it's just something we'll continue to monitor, whether that's the continued questions we get at council putting out there and not people that are aware that they can get their bins replaced and fixed if they need to.
Very good.
And just one more, if I may, Your Worship.
Certainly.
Under the current waste on 6.2, current waste services management improvements, I see that two capital projects. One's the green waste hard stand area is going to get resheeted, and also further work on the Hogan's Pocket gravel road. So my question here is, will either of these two projects include crushed glass as part of the upgrade?
Director?
Yeah, Worship, certainly Hogan Pocket Road, we've obviously trialled that before, so we'll continue to use crushed glass in relation to that road. On the hard stand area, I'm not aware of any proposal to use crushed glass on that project. Okay. So I'm happy to take on those.
All right, further questions? Somebody like to move the report's adoption? Councillor Jones moves, seconded by Councillor Hassan. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like people to think about the world that we live in. It's a throwaway society, as most say, and how often we buy electrical items, as an example, that are packed in polystyrene. So just to keep it in the forefront of our minds and of the community's minds, I just want them to know that we're always trying to do better with waste in our council, and that I'm going to be really keen to see what the outcome of the viability assessment is for polystyrene recycling. Thank you, Worship.
Speaker against. Any other speakers? Councillor Bella speaking for.
I'm going to play around in Lawrence's backyard today. I want to talk about the dump vouchers. To see that we're up to $400,000 redeemed this financial year, 25% redeemed for this period, gives us an idea of how valuable this is to the community. If you look at it, basically says that council is willing to put the hand in our pockets to the degree of, well, conceivably up to $2 million. Now, you've got to remember that $2 million is funded by all ratepayers to assist the users. So we've got a large group funding a smaller group, and that's something that I see as valuable. We see incidences of illegal dumping. I really want to highlight to people, disposing of waste costs a lot of money. So we're covering that cost. We're basically giving away $500,000 a year on top of that. So I think council's doing pretty well from that regard. You know, we're definitely sort of, you know, helping. To emphasise the point raised by Councillor May's question, the liability that we would face if, just on these figures are a bit rubbery, that we would face if we did not have an end of life for these vouchers could be up to $1.5 million a year. And you can imagine down the track 5 years' time if vouchers were stored, which actually can happen. I've actually seen people trying to sell them. All of a sudden, council's got to come up with, you know, $5 or $6 million to cover the cost of dumping. Really means that ratepayers would have to cop a significant rate rise to cover it. So nothing's for free. The other thing I'd like to mention is bin replacement. I've had the misfortune to have had 3 bins replaced in the last few months, one destroyed, one stolen, one then destroyed. And I've got to say, they were replaced. I actually did make police complaints about them, but they were replaced within a couple of days. So the performance of our contractor, and to be honest, our call centre there, reporting it, them replacing it is just outstanding. I can't speak highly enough of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bella. Are there other speakers? Councillor Townsend, speaking for.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to bring to attention the volunteers that have been working at the Resource Recovery Centre for our not-for-profit contractor Incredible. From July last year to the 28th of February, they contributed an incredible 2,223 hours. So I think that's a great or incredible effort, really. And volunteers are our unsung heroes within our community, and their contribution is invaluable. So I'd just like to say a huge thank you to those volunteers who give of their time for all of our not-for-profit organisations out there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Townsend. Other speakers? Councillor Green.
Thank you. I'd like to highlight the education programs run by our waste management team. Fiona went out to my son's kindy recently, and we had an empty milk carton in the household the other morning, and he had his sticker ready to go. He was able to identify whether that was recycling or not, and then I got schooled that I didn't wash it out before I put it into the bin. So that just highlights just how great a job Fiona does, and if this is happening at that level with our children, it's only going to change the world, I think, as those generations get older. So well done to the education team at Waste Management Services.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Bonaventura.
Just to finish off, firstly to thank Councillor Bella for his words in relation to dump vouchers, and they will expire on the 31st of March, Your Worship, so that only leaves basically this weekend and a couple of days after that to use them, so I invite residents to do that. And I must say I used my 2 vouchers last weekend, and there was a huge lineup. It was a very big crowd on that weekend, and in speaking to Gatehouse staff, they said yes, the majority of people coming through on the Sunday when I was there were using dump vouchers. So to the director, yes, the numbers are going to rise in next month's meeting. And just speaking on that, I'd like to ask the director to consider using crushed glass and the upgrade of that hard stand for the green waste. I just think that will give us another feather in our cap. It's another trial, and we can see how it works in that area, and that would give us the opportunity to decide whether it's successful or it's not successful, but at least it's another trial that we can test it on and see how it works in that area. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bonaventura. Are there any other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried. Thank you. So the ECI report for water. Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. So no lost time injuries in the water area, 7 incidents, including 3 injuries. So one was heat stress, one was minor knee pain again from getting out of truck, and one was another repetitive injury. So something we continue to monitor. There has been a couple of heat stress incidents also in the last month. So again, that's something we reminded our staff about. Water consumption remains fairly steady based on the intermittent rainfall we get, so within our targets, so good to see. 94% of work orders were completed within the allocated time frame. Plumbing applications have risen again, back up to 114, so low in January, which we expect, but seeing a strong number of applications, and good to see that team is obviously turning that around very quickly, given there is some emphasis on time frames to get things done. So they're probably the good news ones. The other ones that we've probably identified there, we had a couple of dry weather overflows on our sewer pump stations, so investigating the cause of those. So it's a combination of some SCADA issues and alarms not coming through and then a response rate. So certainly dry weather overflows are something that we certainly don't want to have. So investigating those strongly, they're being reported to the regulator. And also, you'll note there biosolids that we've identified some nickel and chromium in our biosolids, which then obviously changes the opportunity to use that in the compost for our contractor. So I've been doing a fair bit of work in trying to trace the source of that. So our trade waste office has been around visiting everyone. We're now doing sampling of our pump stations and all our industrial areas to try and identify if we can see where that source is. We haven't been able to lay a finger on it yet, and we'll also probably review our trade waste management plan and have a higher emphasis on some of those metals we're starting to see. We also had 7 water quality result issues for the month, so obviously one at Mitch Point, which for an E. coli, which is of concern, but when we've gone back and resampled, that hasn't been an issue. So we're still looking at that. We're about to do the scouring work at Mitch Point this week, and then the construction works in relation to the reservoir being designed and planned to start shortly as well. And the other issue was with Bloomsbury, where we had chloride issues from sodium hypochlorite, so that's been changed out and that issue's now been rectified, but we had 6 samples that were high. Other than that, I'm happy to take your questions, Worship.
Thank you, Director. It's really disappointing to see the nickel and chromium in our system, which you might remember, councillors, we went out to AJK. It really compromises their whole operation for that. So it's disappointing to see that's continuing, but I know our team are doing a pretty good job at trying to track it down. Questions? Councillor Bella has a question.
2 sort of questions. Firstly, to the Director, what are the likely origins of chromium and nickel? Like, not exactly where it's coming from, what is it likely to be from? That's the first.
Director?
Yeah, I think so we've had an idea of sort of like plating and galvanising type companies. So normally they would not be high discharges, and normally they wouldn't be allowed to discharge that into our network. So we've been around visiting those and increased, I suppose, the opportunity in talking to those businesses, and that's what we're trying to find. Is it coming from a source, or is it someone illegally doing something into our network? So that's what we're trying to do. Obviously, I suppose, going back to the pump station to see if we can find out where it's coming from, and then be able to work our way back into the business that operate into that sort of pump station.
Councillor Bella?
Secondly, with regard to contamination, it's not just those things. I'm just wondering whether the Director could outline, as we had happen in the last term, what happens, just for knowledge, what happens when someone dumps oils and that sort of thing into our system and it gets to our treatment plants and affects our little greebies that process it. Would the Director be able to outline that?
Yeah, through your Worship. So certainly the worst case scenario we've had it before is there's a major illegal discharge that kills the bugs, so then you obviously can't treat to your standard, it becomes a regulatory issue. Then you'll have to bring in biomass from another treatment plant and reseed that and get the bugs to grow again. So depending on that can take quite a period of time, but obviously then you'll be having a period, whatever it is, a couple of weeks where you might have non-compliant effluent against your regulated licence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Siegel.
See, there's been considerable rise in the non-residential water leaks, because in January it was 397, and this month it's 493. So, are they repeat people or
new ones? Yeah, Director.
Through your Worship, probably have to take that on notice a little bit. We do tend to see a little bit more when we do have wet weather, that you get a little bit more ground movement. So we do tend to see a slight increase in our own leaks in our own network around this period of time. But I don't have the data to be able to quantify that query, so I have to take that on board and come back.
We'll get that out. Thank you, Auntie. Further questions? Councillor Ventura.
Just on page 105, under the works completed by asset type, I noticed the biggest one last month was the automatic meter readers, just over 200. So the question is, there are a couple of questions. Can I explanation of what the main fault is with the AMRs, why there's such a boost in those numbers, and then what sort of delay would there be from the time it stops to the day we replace this unit? So is there an impost on council in that delay, or not?
Director, can you answer that one?
Your Worship. So the AMR devices, so that's going back to the original program we did roll out in about 2012-13, and they're a plug-in device, so the battery lives are normally 10 years, so we're starting to see some failures in those. Normally the program was that we would be identifying meter replacements with the AMR replacement around the same time. But now, as we've advanced in that time, the AMR devices, the plug-in for mechanical meters, now built into a full meter and has a higher battery life. But we're dealing with a little bit of a legacy issue from the first install. So obviously if if the battery fails, we're not getting the reading, so that then we can't say if people have leaks, and that's how we obviously do it as well. So there's a strong focus in going and identifying those and getting a replacement program in place.
Okay, so a replacement program is underway, so we will look at sort of finding a different system as opposed to just waiting for it to fail. So we're going to start proactively going out. That's the real question here.
Yeah, Your Worship, yeah. So that's what we're actually doing. So proactively going out, replacing them. So certainly the ones where we have a signal failure, we'll go out and replace straight away, and then looking at the age based on those and seeing if there's additional ones in the street that will obviously replace more at that period of time.
Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor May.
And just in relation to the exceedances with the wastewater, and a couple of them happened in the dry weather, I'm just wondering, have we got a problem with our monitoring of the system that enables those, releases to be done? Is there some sort of something happening there?
Very good. You answer that one?
Yeah, through your question. There's a couple of issues, so we're still working through a little bit of a process with staff about on-call, and there's a couple of examples where we had a contractor in place, but there's one example was where a fault was registered and thought the pump was out and the standby pump would operate, and there was a signal that came to show it was operating, but it didn't actually kick in. So normally we would expect someone would go to site and check that, but it was left, and as a result then there was a overflow because the pump was working and then we didn't pick it up. It happened on a weekend, we didn't pick it up till the Monday. So there's some of the things we're working through and try and have a stronger framework about the incidents where we need to get staff out on site from a risk point of view, and where they can obviously deal with alarms, say just on the laptop in relation to their responses. So just working through that process. I mean, historically we haven't had too many dry weather overflows, so certainly not something the regulator wants to see, certainly not something we want to see. So we're taking it seriously to make sure that those gaps are identified and we fix those as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Further questions? No further questions. Somebody like to move then the report's adoption? Councillor Jones moves, seconded by Councillor Townsend. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to take the opportunity while we're on live stream today to let the residents of Midge Point know that, as promised, Council is working through their very complex issues of water quality in their area. Excuse me. And this month they're going to be scouring Kelsey Creek to Midge Point trunk main as part of their commitment to resolving those issues.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Speaker against? Any other speakers? No other speakers? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried. Thanks. 11.4 now. 11.41 is the Org Services Monthly Review for February. Director.
Good morning, Your Worship. Safety continues to be a focus for the department with no LTIs reported since 2017-18. So some highlights over the past month. Still on safety, a training program on electrical awareness, including surface and subsurface hazards, was delivered by Ergon and Dial Before You Dig to MRC operational crews during the month. The customer service team continued to achieve high customer satisfaction rating. This month, 96% of completed surveys indicated that external customers were satisfied with the service provided. Just under 8,000 calls were received in February, which is a similar number to the same period last year, and an increase of over 1,200 from the previous month. February also saw an increase in building approvals and development and plumbing applications launched. 98% of these applications, together with planning advice inquiries received, were all resolved within the required timeframes. Attendance numbers at the Mark continue to increase with over 9,200 attendees recorded in February, up from 8,500 in January. All other recorded facilities also recorded increase in attendances, except for the Blue Water Lagoon, which experienced a decrease since January. The Learn to Swim program at the Mark continues to grow in numbers, with 694 students currently enrolled, which is good for children learning to swim in the region. Fleet took delivery of some shiny new equipment this month, including mowers, trucks, all-terrain vehicles, utes and vans. These plant items will be put to good use in our operational areas. And financial services continue to develop the 2021-22 budget and long-term forecast, with operational budget submissions from the department received in February. Several leadership and workforce capability projects are underway by our people and culture team, which include a values and behaviour review and engagement survey. These initiatives will be rolled out over the next couple of months throughout the organisation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Director. Are there questions for the Director? We have one. Councillor Mann.
Yeah, so just in regard to Blue Water Lagoon and the numbers, like they're substantially dropped since last month, and they're substantially different to the previous year as well. I just wondered if there's anything wrong with the counting mechanism, or yeah, I'm just a bit puzzled.
Through you, Worships, I did query those numbers. Because of COVID, we're actually having to take details and stuff, so we're a bit worried that, it's a different way of counting has been implemented this month, but we are keeping an eye on it. We did ask the operator, they did mention there was a fair bit of wet weather, probably on once school went back on the weekends, which could have affected numbers.
Further questions? Well, I have one, Director. So my report says, from you, it says 10,000 people at the mark. You said 9,000. What's the right answer?
10,000 includes the aquatics, the athletics and the aquatics.
Right.
9,000 was just the aquatics.
But just the swim centre. Wonderful. Great figures. Councillor Bonaventure.
Just on page 137, our monthly spend, or our local spend, is down to around only 53% local. And a lot of times we're up around the 70s, or better in local spend. Is there any real reason for that, or is it just...
It's just timing. Some big payments were made this month, including over 600,000 for the waste levy, which goes to the state government, which obviously is not local. We paid our audit fees. There was a couple of big contracts in our capital space, which were to non-locals as well. So it just depends what our spend is on the month.
Any further questions? Thank you very much, Director. Somebody like to move the report's adoption? Councillor Jones moves. Councillor Mann seconds. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. Page 22 in this report, it was reported that a member of the public was abusive to a staff member on our front counter. It truly is disappointing to see this, and I would like to remind residents our staff are there to provide a friendly service, and they should be respected. And I ask the Director to pass on my thanks to our staff for being our first point of call and our responders to our community's needs.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Councillor Bonaventure speaking for?
Yes, Your Worship. Just in relation to the mark, I think it's just great to see that continued rise in numbers, especially when you compare it to last year. We're a good 1,000 to 1,500 above last year's figure. And I think having broken through that 10,000 barrier, we are going to keep flying from here, because it's the word's getting out on what's available out there, and I'm really looking forward to the next couple of years there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bonaventure. Any other speakers? Councillor Green speaking for.
Thank you. Just again on our aquatic facilities. So, as most will know, death by accident or drowning is one of the key killers of our youngest members of the community, and it's great to see that we're running programs that are enticing people to come along and have their children learn to swim. But on the other end of the spectrum, it's really great to see the free programs that Council's running through our Blue Water Lagoon. Saturday mornings at the Blue Water Lagoon, the water aerobics, it's packed. There's 50, 60 people and many with grey hair in the water there, so it's really fantastic to see that we've got the scope of our community catered for. So
Thanks, Councillor Green. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to add to the Director's the acknowledgement of the call centre staff. I had a daughter that worked in there a few years ago, and I know the pressure of answering 395 calls per day puts on them, and how hard they work to resolve most of those issues at first contact. So a great effort on the part of the team there, and I'd like you to extend our thank yous for that. I'd also like to bring to the attention that Council are continuing to give our young people within our community a great start to their careers with the induction of 12 trainees and 10 apprentices during the month of February. Great effort. As a former recruitment officer, I know that Mackay did experience a huge lack of trade qualified persons in the past. So great to see councillors doing their bit on and overcoming that obstacle and giving our young ones a great start to their careers.
Thanks, Councillor Townsend. Any other speakers? No other speakers. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried. Thank you. 12.1 is receipt of petitions. The petition that on the table today is for limiting the hours of the industrial noise in your residential properties. Are there any questions around this? It's straightforward. So the motion is that we receive it and refer it to the CEO for a report to come back to council. Somebody like to move that? Councillor Mann moves, seconded by Councillor Green. Councillor Mann. Put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried. Thank you. Tenders. We have one tender, the contractual arrangement tendering exemption. This from Mackay South Water Recycling Facility. Gravity filter. CEO, is there anybody wants to say that?
No.
Are there questions for this tender? Pretty well straightforward, I think. Somebody like to move then? It's adoption. Councillor Bonaventura moves, seconded by Councillor Hassan. Councillor Bonaventura.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, look, the purpose of this is just to seek Council's resolution to engage Composite and Plastic Solutions Proprietary Limited without first inviting written tenders to provide the service, equipment and ancillary works for the refurbishment of those gravity filter launders. After 10 years of operation, the fibre reinforced launders, which are a critical component of the gravity filters, are in urgent need of refurbishment, as they have developed cracks in their velocity integrity and their structural supports. Council has been in communication with the original supplier from New Zealand regarding a solution. Unfortunately, with COVID travel restrictions, that's hampered the efforts to engage a company to conduct the high priority refurbishment works. So Council has since sought to locate and engage local specialists to conduct the refurbishment. And Composite Plastic Solutions from Proprietary Limited from Townsville have been on site and are confident they can undertake the works. And these filters are a critical component of the treatment process and require urgent repair by specialist industrial contractors. So councillors, I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation that's in your report and enter into arrangements with Composite and Plastic Solutions Proprietary Limited to undertake the repairs.
Thank you. Speaker against? Any other speakers? Put the motion. Those in favour? Any against? The motion's carried. Thank you. And that's the only tender we've got for consideration. There's no notified motions. There's nobody in the public gallery. Late business. Councillor May.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'd just like to take this opportunity to wish a member of our staff who's been a member for 42 years all the best in their retirement. So that would be Tony DeBrinket, who is the current Manager of Property Services. Can I tell you that Tony started at Serena Shire Council 42 years ago as a junior local government cadet clerk back then, and he was positioned at the Serena Shire Council depot. Tony's worked under 10 CEOs, 9 wares, of which I was one privileged to have that privilege, and 70 councillors during his time at Mackay Regional Council. He has been the acting CEO of Serena Shire Council on numerous occasions. He was the executive manager there for community services, which was a whole broad range of areas, including HR, libraries, community development, youth services, and pools and all of those sorts of things. When councils amalgamated in 2008, Tony became the manager of facilities here at Mackay Regional Council, and very suited to that position because during his time in Serena, when he was living in Serena, actually had a bit of a passion for owner building houses and built 2, to my knowledge, under owner builders. So Tony certainly knew his facilities and property management very well. He then became our property services manager, which took on leases and commercial renting of buildings and working with not-for-profits. Tony, I would hate to count the number of community meetings that Tony attended during his time, not just at Serena Shire Council, but at Mackay Regional Council. And I think that his mannerism and the way that he conducts himself at any public meeting is a testament to who the man is. And I would like to wish him all the very best and happy and healthy retirement.
Thank you very much, Councillor May. Hear, hear. Any other late business, Councillor May?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to talk about the mural that's been completed on behalf of CQ Rescue in Wood Street on the wall of Jeremiah Bullfrog. That mural was funded under Regional Arts Development Fund, to mark their 25th anniversary of the service in Mackay, or in our region, sorry. It's an amazing feat, a collaboration between local artists and southern artists. A lot of business owners have got on board and supported the artists in their work by way of food, umbrellas, hats, all those sorts of things, and it's certainly been embraced by the community. The official launch is this Friday, and I would urge everybody to go and have a look, because not only does there's QR codes on the building, so not only do they give a timeline of the mural being painted, but they also give the opportunity to donate to the CQ Rescue Service, and that's vital because we know how they struggle to raise the funds that they need to keep that service in the air. So I would just ask everybody to support them if they can.
Thanks, Councillor Mann. Further late business, Councillor Bonaventura.
Oh, Your Worship, just wanted to let councillors know that yesterday I attended the Sunwater siren testing at North Eaton for the emergencies, in case of emergency. I was stationed about 2.6 kilometres Mackay side of North Eaton with the Sunwater representative there, and when it did go off, you could hear the voice clearly when he spoke. Not perfectly clear, but good enough. But the siren was very, very audible within the area. In fact, while we were there, a vehicle drove past, and only for about 50 metres of approach and 50 metres of departure of that vehicle, you couldn't hear the siren. But after that, it was very, very audible. So I think it's a good thing, and my wish and yours, I'm sure, is that we never ever hear it in operation. So,
thank you very much, Councillor Bonaventura. Any further late business? No further late business. Councillors, we have 3 items of confidential reports to consider. They're fairly well standard reports. Is there any reason to close the business of council to the public? None. Let's then consider these reports. 17.1, the approved sponsorship under the Invest Mackay Events and Conference Attraction Program for February of 2021. Would somebody like to move? Councillor Aglett moves, Councillor Green seconds. Those in favour? Any against? It's carried, thank you. 17.2, the draft minutes of the Invest Mackay Events and Conference Attraction Program for the Advisory Committee meeting on the 9th of March. Would somebody like to move? Councillor Green moves, Councillor Hassan seconds. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried. And 17.3, the approved concessions under the Facilitating Development of Mackay Policy for February 21. Somebody like to move? Councillor Engel moves, Councillor Townsend seconds. Those in favour? Any against? Motion's carried. Thank you. Well, that's it. Okay, so thanks very much, councillors. Thank you, CEO. Thank you, directors. I declare the meeting closed.